So in this section I'm going to show you how to calculate a difference quotient. A difference quotient is important, especially if you take a calculus class, whether it's business calculus or a calculus 1 class. Now the difference quotient I'm going to use here, I'm going to use H in my difference quotient, but just make sure you understand that in some courses they will actually use a term called delta x, and delta x looks just like a little triangle with an x beside it, but you just treat it the same way as you treat H in the difference quotient. So H is a little more practical and doesn't require as much room to write, so we're going to use H. So what is the difference quotient? Well, the difference quotient is actually the difference of the function evaluated at x plus h and the function itself, and then divided by h. That's where you get the quotient from. So the top is a difference, and then the whole thing is a quotient. Therefore, it's called a difference quotient. Now, to evaluate a difference quotient, you need to have some function, because each function will have a different difference quotient. So, for instance, I would give you a function here, f of x equal 3x minus 5, and I would ask you to evaluate the difference quotient for that function. Now, I like to use a 3-step process. In step 1, I calculate this term here, and then in step 2, I calculate the difference, which would be this numerator, and then in step 3, I calculate the entire difference quotient by dividing it by the result in step 2 by h. So step 1, I'm going to evaluate the function at x plus h. Now this actually is pretty simple because we just replace this x with x plus h. So instead of 3x minus 5, I have 3 times x plus h minus 5. And then I can distribute the 3 here and get 3x plus 3h right here, and then carry my minus 5 over. So there is the f of x plus h. Now I want to calculate the numerator, which is f of x plus h minus f of x. Now I've already calculated this first term, f of x plus h, and I know it is simply this from the first step. So I have 3x plus 3h minus 5, and I have to subtract from that the function that I was given, f of x. Now when I subtract, I have to distribute the minus through both terms. So I'm actually going to have minus 3x here, and then I'm going to have plus 5. And then notice that when you subtract, 3x plus negative 3x cancels, and minus 5 plus 5 cancels, and so all I have left is the 3h. So the result in step 2 is just the 3h. The last step is to take what we got in step 2, which is this difference, and then divide it by the h. So in step 2 I calculated the difference to be 3h. So I put that on top, and so I have 3h over h. And as long as h is not equal to 0, then h over h will equal 1. So the result of the difference quotient is just 3. And so I state that h cannot be 0, because if h was 0, then 0 over 0 wouldn't give you 3. But don't worry about that. Now on this one I'm giving you a quadratic function, x squared minus 2x. So I'll proceed the same way as I did before. I'll evaluate that function at x plus h. So instead of x squared, I'll have x plus h quantity squared. And instead of minus 2x, I'll have minus 2 times the quantity x plus h. And I'll go ahead and simplify this. If you multiply x plus h times x plus h, you'll get x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. And then if you distribute the minus 2 through these two terms, you'll get minus 2x minus 2h. Well, then I'll bring down that term. That's my f of x plus h. I'll bring down all of that, and then from that I will subtract the function x squared minus 2x. Now remember, when you distribute this minus, you're going to get minus x squared, and that's going to become plus 2x. So let's change that to plus a minus x squared and a plus 2x. Now you can see that if I have x squared and minus x squared, they're going to cancel. And if I have minus 2x and plus 2x, they're going to cancel. So actually, let me write down what we get from that step. So what you're left with is 2xh, which I wrote there, plus h squared, which I wrote there, and then the minus 2h, which I wrote there. Well then, you know, in the next step, then you have to take that, make that your numerator, because that's your difference, and then you divide that by h. So really it's just a matter of dividing h into each one of these. So if I take 2xh and divide it by h, I get 2x. If I take the h squared and divide it by h, I get h. And then if I take the minus 2h and divide it by h, I just get minus 2. So my answer is 2x plus h minus 2. Now, in the calculus course, you'll actually do some more complicated functions, like maybe some radical functions or some rational functions or even some trig functions. But in an algebra course, I restrict it to just linear functions and quadratic functions, just to give you a taste of the difference quotient.